I'm Sadie, 32 years old, and last month, I finally bought my dream home in Boston after years of hard work as a software engineer. A beautiful 3-bedroom house with a garden, all mine. Meanwhile, my sister Megan was facing eviction with her husband and 3 kids due to months of unpaid rent. At our family dinner last Sunday, my parents dropped a bomb. They expected me to let Megan's entire family move into my new home. The look on their faces when I didn't immediately agree still haunts me. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family members try to take advantage of your success. Now let me tell you what really happened. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I always knew where I stood in my family's hierarchy. My sister Megan, 2 years older than me, was the golden child from the moment she was born. With her naturally blonde hair, outgoing personality, and social confidence, she embodied everything my parents valued. I, on the other hand, was the awkward one with glasses and braces who preferred books to parties. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Megan was crowned homecoming queen, my parents threw a massive party and displayed her photo prominently in our living room. When I won the state science competition that same year, they merely nodded and said, "That's nice, Sadie." My mother framed newspaper clippings of Megan's crowning, but tucked my academic awards into a drawer. School became my sanctuary. While Megan barely maintained a C average, I excelled academically. My teachers recognized what my parents couldn't see: my intelligence, work ethic, and determination. Mrs. Kendrick, my high school computer science teacher, became particularly influential. "Your mind works differently, Sadie," she told me. "That's not a weakness, it's your greatest strength." When college application time arrived, my parents made their priorities clear. "We've been saving for Megan's education since she was born," my father announced at dinner. "Sadie, you'll need to find scholarships if you want to go somewhere expensive." The unspoken message was clear: Megan's future mattered more. I threw myself into scholarship applications with a vengeance, staying up late after finishing homework to complete essays and forms. My efforts paid off when I received a nearly full scholarship to MIT for computer science. My parents seemed almost disappointed that they couldn't use my college costs as a reason to limit my ambitions. College was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and hard work. I made real friends who appreciated me for who I was. I worked part-time at the campus IT department to cover expenses beyond my scholarship, often taking extra shifts during holidays when other students went home. Those holidays alone on campus were bittersweet. Lonely, yes, but also peaceful compared to the constant comparisons I faced at home. Meanwhile, Megan dropped out of community college after one semester, claiming it wasn't the right fit. My parents consoled her, saying college isn't for everyone, and praising her for knowing herself. When I graduated with honors from MIT, my parents attended, but spent most of the celebration talking about Megan's new job at a boutique. After graduation, I accepted a position at a growing tech company in Boston. The distance from my family wasn't accidental. I needed space to become my own person without the shadow of being the lesser daughter. I limited my visits home to major holidays, each time returning to Boston emotionally drained from the familiar dynamics. My career progressed steadily through hard work and consistent performance. While my colleagues went out for drinks after work, I often stayed late, taking on challenging projects that others avoided. Each promotion felt like vindication, proof that I was valuable despite what my family had always implied. At 30, I achieved a milestone that filled me with quiet pride. I purchased my own home. It wasn't extravagant, a 3-bedroom Victorian with a small garden in an up-and-coming neighborhood. But it was mine, bought entirely with money I had earned and saved. I didn't tell my family until after closing, knowing they would somehow diminish my achievement. My mother's response was predictable. "That's a lot of space for just one person. Planning to find a husband finally." My father added, "Hope you didn't overpay in this market. Did you have someone check the foundation?" I created a peaceful sanctuary in that house. One bedroom became my home office, the second a guest room that my friends occasionally used. I adopted a Maine Coon cat named Felix, who became my loyal companion. My garden, though small, bloomed with carefully tended perennials. For the first time in my life, I had created a space that was entirely mine, where no one compared me unfavorably to anyone else. 2 months ago, I was promoted to Senior Development Manager with a significant salary increase. I mentioned it casually during a phone call with my mother, who responded with, "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Megan's thinking of starting a jewelry business on Etsy?" She's always been so creative. Some patterns never change, but I had built a life I was proud of with or without my family's approval. I had no idea that my success was about to become the solution to my sister's latest crisis. While I was building my career brick by steady brick, Megan's life followed a very different pattern. After dropping out of college, she worked briefly at various retail jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months before becoming bored or having differences with management. At 22, she married Tyler, her high school boyfriend, who had returned to our hometown after his own college dropout experience. Tyler was handsome and charming like Megan, and they made a photogenic couple. My parents adored him immediately, especially when he called my father Sir and complimented my mother's cooking. The wedding was lavish, with my parents covering all expenses. I served as bridesmaid, wearing a dress Megan selected that was deliberately unflattering on my figure. "They're just starting out," my mother explained when they gifted the newlyweds a down payment for a small starter home. The house was modest, but in a nice neighborhood. Tyler worked sporadically in construction, while Megan took part-time retail positions that she quit whenever they became too stressful. Despite their limited income, they leased new cars and took vacations they couldn't afford. Their first child, Emma, arrived a year after the wedding. My parents were ecstatic about their first grandchild, with my mother visiting daily to help. 2 years later came Lucas, followed by Sophia, another 2 years after that. With each child, my parents provided more support, financially and otherwise. I tried to be a good aunt, despite the distance, sending thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts and video chatting with the kids when possible. I genuinely loved my nieces and nephew, even though my relationship with their parents remained strained. Emma, the oldest, showed early signs of the same academic inclination I had, which secretly pleased me. What I didn't know until later was that behind the happy family photos on social media, Megan and Tyler's financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. They had refinanced their house twice to pay off credit card debt, then sold it at a loss when they couldn't make the payments. They moved into a rental house where the pattern continued, living beyond their means while my parents repeatedly bailed them out. "It's just temporary," my mother would say when she mentioned sending them money. "The economy is tough for young families these days." The irony that I was the same age as Megan and managing just fine seemed lost on her. Tyler bounced between jobs, always with grand explanations for why each position wasn't worthy of his talents. He started a landscaping business that failed after he invested in expensive equipment but secured few clients. Next came a house-flipping venture with a friend that ended when they ran out of money mid-renovation. Through it all, he maintained an air of confidence that his big break was just around the corner. Megan, meanwhile, cycled through various passions that she claimed would become profitable businesses: photography, handmade soap, interior design, consulting. Each venture began with expensive equipment purchases and ended with abandonment when it required consistent effort. All the while, she insisted on maintaining appearances: designer clothes for the children, elaborate birthday parties, the newest iPhone. Last Christmas, when I visited for 2 days, I noticed concerning signs. My parents, now in their 60s, looked tired. My father, who had planned to retire that year, mentioned casually that he was putting it off a while longer. My mother had sold her collection of antique jewelry, pieces she had once told me would be heirlooms. When I asked about these changes, they changed the subject. What I learned through my aunt was that my parents had withdrawn a significant portion of their retirement savings to help Megan and Tyler avoid bankruptcy after their latest business failure. They had also been paying the family's rent for several months, while Tyler was between opportunities. I felt a mix of emotions: concern for my parents' financial future, frustration at their enabling behavior, and if I'm honest, a lingering hurt that they would deplete their security for Megan while having never offered me similar support. Not that I needed it, but the disparity was telling. This was the backdrop when I received a call from my mother 3 weeks ago, inviting me to Sunday dinner with unusual insistence. "The whole family will be there," she said. "It's important that you come, Sadie." Something in her tone made me wary, but I agreed, arranging to fly to Chicago for the weekend. Little did I know that dinner would be the setting for an ambush that would test my boundaries in ways I never anticipated. I arrived at my parents' house that Sunday afternoon with an uneasy feeling. The forced cheerfulness in my mother's greeting only intensified my suspicion that something was amiss. Inside, Megan was setting the table, an unusual sight given her typical aversion to household tasks. She smiled too brightly when she saw me. "Sadie, you look great. Have you lost weight?" This opening compliment was so out of character that alarm bells rang immediately. Megan had never shown interest in my appearance except to criticize. The children ran to greet me with genuine enthusiasm that momentarily lifted my spirits. Emma, now 8, proudly told me about her science project. Lucas, 6, showed me his new action figure, while 4-year-old Sophia simply hugged my legs. Despite my complicated relationship with their parents, I adored these kids. Tyler emerged from the living room, hand extended. "The successful aunt has arrived. How's life treating you in that big new house?" His tone was just a shade too interested, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Dinner was my mother's specialty, pot roast with all the trimmings. The conversation remained superficially pleasant, with everyone asking overly detailed questions about my house. How many square feet was it? Did it have a finished basement? Were there parks nearby? Each question felt like reconnaissance rather than genuine interest. It wasn't until dessert was served that my father cleared his throat and addressed me directly. "Sadie, we asked you here today because there's a family situation we need to discuss." He glanced at Megan, who suddenly became very interested in her apple pie. "Megan and Tyler have had some temporary setbacks," he continued carefully. "Their landlord has unfortunately asked them to vacate their rental property by the end of the month." "Asked to vacate," I repeated, sensing a euphemism. "They've been evicted," my mother clarified, her voice dropping on the shameful word. "There were some misunderstandings about the rent payments," Tyler jumped in. "The guy's a complete jerk. We were only a couple months behind, and he knows I've got some big opportunities coming up." I nodded slowly, wondering why they were sharing this with me. Did they expect a loan that would be uncomfortable but manageable? I could help them with a security deposit for a new place if necessary. "The thing is," my father continued, not meeting my eyes, "rental prices have gone crazy. They can't find anything affordable in a decent school district for the kids." "That's tough," I said cautiously. "Have you looked at apartments instead of houses, or maybe something a bit further out with a longer commute?" Megan shook her head dismissively. "The kids need a yard, and Tyler needs to be close to the city for his networking contacts." There was an expectant pause. I waited for someone to state directly what they wanted from me. Finally, my father said it. "We've been discussing solutions, and it seems the most sensible option is for them to move in with you in Boston." I nearly choked on my water. "Move in with me? It's perfect." My mother jumped in eagerly. "You have that big house with 3 bedrooms. Megan and Tyler could take the master, the girls could share the 2nd bedroom, and Lucas could have the 3rd. "What about my home office?" I asked, still processing the enormity of what they were suggesting. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "You can set up a desk in the living room, or the basement. Does the basement have good light?" "That big house is wasted on just you and a cat?" my father added, as if this were an obvious truth. Megan finally spoke up. You don't even have to change anything. We'll just move right in and work around whatever you have. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. With your fancy job, you're probably not even home much anyway. We'd barely be in your way. I sat there stunned by their presumption. They weren't asking if their family of 5 could temporarily stay with me. They were informing me of their decision. How long would this arrangement last? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. The question was met with uncomfortable glances. Well, my mother said, until they get back on their feet. Which won't take long, Tyler added quickly. I've got several promising leads, very promising. So maybe a few months? I pressed. More uncomfortable silence. We thought, my father said carefully, given the housing market and school considerations, it might be best not to put a specific timeline on it. In other words, indefinitely. And who would cover the additional expenses? I asked. Utilities will increase significantly with 5 more people, not to mention groceries, wear and tear on the house. Tyler laughed, as if I'd made a joke. Come on, Sadie. You make what 6 figures, that's more than enough to help family out. We'd contribute when we can, of course. The expectations became clearer by the second. They weren't just asking for housing. They expected me to financially support them as well. When I didn't immediately agree, Megan's eyes filled with tears. Don't you care about your nieces and nephew? Where are we supposed to go? Sadie, do you want us to be homeless? The emotional manipulation was as transparent as it was effective. I felt a familiar guilt rising. The same guilt that had kept me returning to family gatherings where I was consistently undervalued. But alongside that guilt was something new, a firm resolve that had developed during my years of independence. This was my home they were discussing, my sanctuary earned through years of hard work and sacrifice, and they were treating it as a resource to be commandeered without my consent. The tension around the table was palpable as everyone waited for my response. It was clear they had expected immediate agreement, perhaps gratitude that I could be useful to the golden child. Instead, they faced my silence as I carefully considered how to respond to this extraordinary demand. I understand you're in a difficult situation. I began carefully, and I want to help, but having 6 people move into my home isn't a viable solution. 5 faces stared back at me with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Clearly, this wasn't the response they had anticipated. What if I help you find an affordable apartment? I suggested. I could assist with the security deposit or maybe even the first month's rent to help you get established. My offer, which I thought was generous, was met with immediate dismissal. An apartment? Megan scoffed. Where would the kids play? Where would Tyler set up his home office for his business ventures? Family takes care of family, Sadie, my father said sternly. Your mother and I have always taught you that. I felt a flash of irritation at the selective application of this principle. Yes, and I am offering to help, just not in the specific way you're demanding. Offering to help? Megan's voice rose. Writing a check isn't helping Sadie. It's the easy way out. You've always taken the easy way out. I nearly laughed at the absurdity of this statement. The easy way out, I worked through college while you dropped out. I built my career while you and Tyler jumped from one failed venture to another. I saved for years to buy my house while you've been bailed out repeatedly. You've always been selfish. Megan shot back, tears streaming now. Always thinking about yourself. Some of us have children to consider. Having children doesn't entitle you to take over someone else's home, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Must be nice to have gotten all those lucky breaks in your career. Some of us haven't had everything handed to us on a silver platter. The injustice of this statement momentarily left me speechless. My parents, rather than correcting this outrageous mischaracterization, nodded in agreement. You've always had it easier, Sadie, my mother said. School came naturally to you. You never had Megan's struggles. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that engaging with this distorted version of reality would lead nowhere productive. I want to be clear, I am willing to help in ways that I can manage, but I cannot have 5 people move into my home indefinitely. So that's it. A firm no. My father's face was reddening, a dangerous sign I remembered from childhood disagreements. That's my decision, yes. I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. After all we've done for you, he exploded, slamming his hand on the table and making the dishes jump. This was so absurd that I couldn't let it pass. What exactly have you done for me, Dad? You didn't pay for my education. You've never helped me financially. You've never even visited me in Boston. We raised you, my mother interjected, tears welling in her eyes. We gave you a home and food and clothes. Yes, you did the legal minimum required of parents, I acknowledged, and I'm grateful for that. But it doesn't mean I owe you my home. Megan was now sobbing dramatically, her children looking on with confused expressions. My babies will be homeless because of you, she wailed. How will you explain to Emma and Lucas and Sophia that their aunt doesn't care if they have a roof over their heads? It was manipulation, pure and simple, but it still twisted something in my chest. I looked at my nieces and nephew, their small faces concerned at their mother's distress. Your children will not be homeless, I said firmly. There are options you haven't explored. Downsizing, moving to a less expensive area, perhaps even temporarily moving in with Mom and Dad while you get back on your feet. This last suggestion caused my parents to exchange alarmed glances. That's not possible, my mother said quickly. Your father's back. The stairs in our house. It just wouldn't work. The subtext was clear. They were willing to volunteer my home, but not their own. I'm sorry, I said, standing up. I've made my decision. I'll help in other ways, but I won't have 5 people moving into my home indefinitely. As I gathered my coat and purse, the accusations flew selfish, heartless, ungrateful cold. Each word stung, but underneath the pain was a growing certainty that I was making the right choice. You'll regret this, Sadie, my father called as I walked to the door. Family is all that matters in the end. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I agree. That's why I wish you had treated me like family all these years. The silence that followed me out the door was more satisfying than any last word could have been. Driving back to my hotel, I felt a complex mix of emotions, guilt, and doubt, yes, but also something unexpected. Pride in having stood up for myself at last. Little did I know that my refusal at dinner was only the beginning of what would become an escalating family crisis. The next morning, my phone began buzzing at 6 a.m. with messages from family members. My mother had apparently spent the evening calling relatives to share her version of events, namely that I was selfishly refusing to help my homeless sister and her innocent children. Aunt Judy, who had always been kind to me, texted, "Disappointed to hear about your decision, Sadie. Family should come first." Uncle Robert, my father's brother, left a voicemail suggesting I search my heart and do the right thing. Even my cousin Tracy, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, sent a Facebook message asking how I could sleep at night. The coordinated pressure campaign was impressive in its efficiency. By noon, I had received communications from family members I barely knew, all expressing their disappointment in my character. Megan took a different approach, posting cryptic but pointed updates on social media, discovering who truly cares about us during our hardest times, and some people have everything but compassion. She shared photos of her children looking particularly sad, captioned with, "Trying to explain adult problems to innocent hearts." The comments sections filled with supportive messages and outrage on her behalf, though she was careful never to explicitly mention me. She didn't need to. Our relatives connected the dots, and added their own condemnations. I muted my notifications and checked out of my hotel a day early, fleeing back to Boston and the sanctuary of my home. Walking through my front door, I was struck anew by how precious this space was to me. Not just the physical structure, but what it represented: independence, security, a life built on my own terms. The respite was short-lived. The calls and texts continued escalating in both frequency and emotional intensity. My mother called crying, saying she couldn't sleep for worry about where her grandchildren would live. My father's messages grew increasingly angry, eventually suggesting that I was dead to him if I didn't reconsider. Megan sent photos of the children packing their toys, asking which ones they should donate, since we won't have room for them anymore. The emotional manipulation was transparent but effective. I found myself lying awake at night questioning my decision, despite knowing intellectually that it was reasonable. My work began to suffer. As a senior development manager, my job required focus and clear decision-making. Instead, I found myself distracted, checking my phone, constantly bracing for the next attack. My team noticed my uncharacteristic distraction, with one colleague gently asking if everything was all right. After a particularly difficult meeting where I struggled to concentrate, my boss Janet called me into her office. "Whatever's going on in your personal life is affecting your performance," she said kindly but firmly. "Would you like to talk about it?" The simple question broke something in me. To my horror, I found myself crying in front of my boss, something I'd never done in my professional life. Between sobs, I explained the situation. Janet listened without interruption, then said something that would stay with me. "Sadie, if a friend told you this story about her family, what advice would you give her?" The question clarified things immediately. Of course, I wouldn't advise anyone to let 5 people move into their home indefinitely, especially given the history of financial irresponsibility. "I think you need professional support to deal with this," Janet suggested. "Our employee assistance program includes counseling. I strongly recommend you use it." I took her advice and scheduled an appointment with a therapist the next day. Dr. Melissa Chin was a calm, insightful woman who specialized in family dynamics. In our first session, she helped me identify the patterns of emotional manipulation I'd been subjected to throughout my life. "What you're describing contains elements of what we call golden child and scapegoat dynamics," she explained. "These roles are often assigned in childhood and can persist into adulthood if not addressed." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Chen helped me understand that my feelings of guilt weren't proportional to the situation. "Guilt is appropriate when you've done something wrong," she said. "Have you done something wrong by refusing to let 5 people move into your home indefinitely?" Put that way, the answer was clearly no. "Setting boundaries isn't selfish," she continued. "It's necessary for healthy relationships. The extreme reaction you're getting suggests your family isn't accustomed to you having boundaries at all." With Dr. Chen's guidance, I made the difficult decision to temporarily limit contact with my family. I sent a brief, clear email explaining that I needed space from the constant pressure and would be taking a break from communication for a while. I blocked their numbers on my phone and muted them on social media, creating a digital boundary to match my physical one. The silence that followed was both disturbing and liberating. For the first time in weeks, I could think clearly. I threw myself back into my work, finding comfort in the logical problems of software development that had always been my refuge. I reached out to friends I had neglected during the family crisis, accepting invitations I might have declined before. Dinner with my colleague, Maria, and her husband. A weekend hiking trip with my old college roommate. Each social connection reminded me that family isn't just defined by blood. My 33rd birthday arrived during this period of limited contact. In previous years, I would have received perfunctory calls from my parents and a last-minute text from Megan. This year, my phone remained silent from their end. Instead, my team surprised me with cake at the office, and a group of friends took me out for dinner. As I blew out the candles on the chocolate mousse they'd ordered for dessert, I realized something important: I wasn't alone without my family. I had built connections with people who valued me for exactly who I was. The peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. Then came the day I returned home from work to find my parents' car parked in front of my house. My heart sank at the sight of my father's recognizable silver sedan. I briefly considered driving past and returning later, but that would only delay the inevitable. Taking a deep breath, I parked and approached my own front door with the caution of someone entering enemy territory. My parents and Megan were standing on my porch. My mother clutched her purse nervously while my father's arms were crossed over his chest. Megan was peering through my front windows, her hand cupped around her eyes to block the glare. "What are you doing here?" I asked, making no move to unlock the door. "We thought it would be helpful to see the space in person," my mother explained, as if this were a perfectly normal reason to appear unannounced at someone's home after weeks of no contact. "To work out where everything would go." The audacity was breathtaking. "I've already told you that Megan and her family aren't moving in with me," I said calmly. "Nothing has changed." "We just want to see the house," my father insisted. "You can at least give us a tour after we've come all this way." "No," I said simply. "I didn't invite you, and I'm not comfortable with this ambush." Megan stepped forward. "We need to see where the kids would sleep. Emma's having anxiety about the move." "There is no move," I repeated firmly. "I've been very clear about that." "Just let us in, Sadie," my father demanded, his voice rising. "Stop being so difficult." I noticed my neighbor Mrs. Peterson watching from her porch across the street. Another neighbor slowed his dog walk to observe the confrontation. This was quickly becoming a public spectacle. "I'm not letting you in," I stated clearly. "Please leave now." "You can't be serious," Megan exclaimed. "After we drove all the way from Chicago." "I didn't ask you to come," I pointed out. "And I've been very clear about my position. Nothing has changed." My father's face reddened dangerously. "This is ridiculous. We're your family." "Family respects boundaries," I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. "You've shown up at my home unannounced after I explicitly asked for space. That's not respectful." My mother began to cry, a tactic that had worked on me countless times before. "I just want to see where my grandchildren will be living. Is that too much to ask?" "They won't be living here," I said gently but firmly. "And I think you know that. This visit isn't going to change my mind." The confrontation might have escalated further if not for an unexpected intervention. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, approached with determination in her step. "Everything all right here, Sadie?" she called. "I noticed you have visitors." My father turned to her with forced politeness. "Family matter. Nothing to worry about." Mrs. Peterson was undeterred. "Well, it's getting rather loud for a family matter. Perhaps you should continue this discussion inside." She looked at me pointedly. "I've asked them to leave, actually," I explained. "They showed up unannounced." "I see," Mrs. Peterson said, giving my family a disapproving look. "Well, in this neighborhood, we respect each other's privacy. Perhaps another time would be better after proper arrangements have been made." My father looked like he might argue, but my mother tugged at his sleeve. The presence of a witness had changed the dynamic. With obvious reluctance, they began moving toward their car. "This isn't over, Sadie," my father called over his shoulder. "Family obligations don't just disappear because they're inconvenient." Once they had driven away, I thanked Mrs. Peterson for her intervention. "I recognize bullying when I see it," she said simply, "even when it's family doing the bullying." Her words stayed with me long after she returned to her own home. Inside, I did a quick check to make sure nothing had been disturbed. A chilling thought occurred to me. Did anyone else have a key to my house? Years ago, I had given my parents a spare key for emergencies. I had never asked for it back, assuming they would have no reason to use it. Given their recent behavior, that assumption now seemed naive. I called a locksmith that same evening and had all my locks changed, adding a security system with cameras for good measure. The next day, I received an email from Tyler that made my blood run cold. "Your parents gave us your house key," he wrote casually. "We stopped by while you were at work to take some measurements. Your master bedroom is smaller than we expected, but we can make it work. The kids are excited about the backyard." They had been inside my home without my knowledge or permission. The violation left me shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. I immediately checked my security camera footage, which confirmed that Megan and Tyler had indeed entered my house that morning, spending nearly an hour inside. The footage showed them measuring rooms, opening closets, even sitting on my bed to test it. Tyler had opened my home office drawers, flipping through papers. At one point, he had picked up a framed photo of me receiving an industry award and remarked, "She always needs everyone to know how smart she is." I downloaded the footage and forwarded it to my lawyer friend Dana, asking for advice. Her response was immediate. "This is criminal trespass. You have every right to pursue charges if you want to." The thought of pressing charges against my own family was extreme, but their behavior had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I sent a brief direct email to my parents and Megan. "I am aware that you entered my home without permission while I was at work. This is trespassing. I have changed my locks and installed security cameras. Any further attempts to enter my property without explicit invitation will result in legal action. This is not negotiable." The response was swift and predictable. Outrage accusations of overreaction, claims that family doesn't trespass on family. But beneath the bluster, I sensed something new, the realization that I was serious about my boundaries. That evening, I received an anonymous email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "You should know the truth about your sister's eviction." The anonymous email turned out to be from Megan and Tyler's former landlord, a man named Robert Chambers. He had seen Megan's social media posts about being unfairly evicted and felt compelled to set the record straight. "Your sister and her husband weren't evicted after a couple of months of missed rent," he wrote. "They hadn't paid rent for 7 months. I worked with them repeatedly, accepting partial payments and excuses about money that was always coming next week. The final straw wasn't even the unpaid rent. It was the extensive damage to the property." Attached to the email were photos documenting the condition of the rental house walls, with large holes punched through the drywall carpet stained beyond recognition, a bathroom with severe water damage from an unreported leak, a kitchen with broken cabinets and burned countertops. "I'm not trying to cause family problems," the landlord continued. "But I couldn't stand by while they portrayed themselves as victims of an unreasonable landlord. The truth is, I lost thousands of dollars on them, and their security deposit didn't come close to covering the repairs." The evidence was shocking, but not entirely surprising. It aligned with the pattern of irresponsibility I had observed from a distance. What bothered me most was not the property damage itself, but the deliberate misrepresentation of the situation to manipulate my sympathy. Wanting to verify this information before acting on it, I reached out to a friend who worked in real estate. She helped me run a background check on Megan and Tyler, something I should have done before considering any financial assistance. The results were worse than I expected. In addition to the recent eviction, they had been evicted twice before from previous residences. They had multiple judgments against them for unpaid debts. Tyler had a suspended license for unpaid traffic tickets. There were several maxed-out credit cards and a defaulted car loan. The picture that emerged was of 2 adults who consistently lived beyond their means and avoided the consequences of their actions through manipulation and evasion. And now they wanted to bring this chaos into my carefully ordered life. Armed with this information, I consulted with Maya, a financial advisor friend. "If you really want to help your sister's family," she advised, "giving them a place to stay isn't the answer. It's enabling behavior that hasn't worked for them. Together, we developed an alternative plan, one that would offer genuine assistance without sacrificing my boundaries. I would help them find affordable housing in Chicago and provide a one-time loan for the security deposit with clear repayment terms documented in a formal agreement. Additionally, I would pay for financial literacy classes for both Megan and Tyler with the stipulation that they complete the course. This approach addresses the immediate housing crisis while encouraging long-term change, Maya explained. It's more truly helpful than just giving them a place to crash indefinitely. I presented this offer to Megan and Tyler via email, copying my parents so everyone would have the same information. Their response was predictably indignant. Financial literacy classes? That's insulting, Megan replied. We don't need classes, we need stability for our children. And a loan with repayment terms. We're family, not a bank transaction. Tyler was more direct. We know you can afford to help us more than this. This offer is just your way of feeling superior while doing the bare minimum. My parents' response was to escalate the pressure. They began calling my friends and colleagues, hoping to enlist them in their campaign to change my mind. One morning, I arrived at work to find my mother in the lobby, having told reception she had an urgent family matter to discuss. I had to ask security to escort her out, an experience that left me shaking with a mixture of anger and shame. The situation reached a breaking point when I received an alert from my credit monitoring service about an attempted credit card application in my name. The application had been denied due to a security freeze I had placed on my credit years ago after a data breach at a former employer. The attempt had originated from an IP address in Chicago. While I couldn't prove it was Tyler, the timing and circumstances made it the most likely explanation. Someone had tried to use my excellent credit to open a high-limit card, presumably to solve their financial problems at my expense. I forwarded the information to Dana, who confirmed my suspicions. This looks like attempted identity theft. It's a serious crime, Sadie. The discovery left me cold with anger and disappointment. This was no longer about boundaries or family dynamics. This was criminal behavior targeting me specifically. After years of emotional manipulation, they had escalated to attempted financial fraud. I called my parents directly, the first time I had spoken to them by phone since the confrontation at my house. I know about the credit card application, I said without preamble. I have evidence it came from Chicago. My father blustered about accusations and family loyalty, but my mother's telling silence spoke volumes. She knew. Perhaps not in advance, but she knew now. This is my final offer, I said when they had run out of denials. I will help Megan and Tyler find affordable housing and provide a one-time security deposit loan with formal repayment terms. I will pay for financial counseling, but if there is any further attempt to access my finances or pressure me, I will file a police report about the attempted identity theft and cut contact completely. The ultimatum hung in the silence between us. Finally, my father spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. We'll talk to them. 2 days later, I received a terse email from Megan accepting my original offer with no acknowledgement of the credit card incident. It wasn't an apology or a recognition of boundaries, but it was a surrender of sorts. The siege was over. 6 months have passed since that turning point. Megan, Tyler, and the children are now settled in a modest apartment in a Chicago suburb with good schools. The rent is within their means, something I verified before co-signing the lease, and they've kept up with payments so far. The security deposit loan remains unpaid, but I had expected that. I consider it a small price for the peace and boundaries I've maintained. More importantly, both Megan and Tyler completed the financial literacy program I arranged, though, with varying degrees of engagement. Tyler participated minimally, doing just enough to fulfill the requirement, while Megan showed unexpected interest in the budgeting sections. My relationship with my parents has entered a new phase, one of cautious, limited contact. We speak monthly by phone with conversations that remain superficial but civil. They have not visited Boston again, nor have I returned to Chicago. This distance, while painful in some ways, has been necessary for my mental health. The most surprising development has been my evolving relationship with my nieces and nephew. Freed from the pressure of housing their parents, I've found ways to be meaningfully present in their lives from a distance. I set up a video call schedule to help Emma with her math homework once a week. I send Lucas books about dinosaurs, his current passion. For Sophia's 5th birthday, I arranged for her to take ballet lessons. Something Megan had mentioned the child wanted, but they couldn't afford. These targeted contributions feel different from the blank check my family had initially demanded. They allow me to support the children's development while maintaining appropriate boundaries with their parents. My parents have slowly begun to see my perspective, though they would never admit it explicitly. My mother recently mentioned that Megan is learning to be more independent these days, a tacit acknowledgement that my approach might have merit. My father still maintains that families should stick together, but he no longer suggests this means sacrificing my home or financial security. Megan and Tyler's progress has been uneven but real. Tyler finally secured steady employment as a warehouse manager. Not the entrepreneurial dream he had chased for years, but a position with benefits and stability. Megan has started working part-time as a teacher's aide at the children's school, her first job in years that has lasted more than a few months. They still struggle financially, making choices I consider questionable. But they are facing the consequences of those choices themselves, rather than expecting bailouts. It's a painful but necessary growth process that I observe from a distance, offering guidance when asked, but no longer feeling responsible for their outcomes. The peace I feel in my home now is profound. Felix the cat still claims the sunny spot on my window seat each afternoon. My garden flourished this summer, with no risk of being trampled by children who hadn't been taught to respect boundaries. My home office remains my sanctuary for both work and personal projects. I've strengthened relationships with friends who became my support system during the crisis. Maria and her husband have become regular dinner guests. My neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, and I exchange baked goods and gardening tips. My therapist, Dr. Chen, has helped me work through the lingering guilt and establish healthier patterns of thinking about family obligations. Perhaps most significantly, I've become a mentor to Emma, whose academic interests remind me so much of my younger self. Our weekly math sessions have expanded to include discussions of science and technology. At 9, she's already talking about wanting to be an engineer. I've started a small college fund for her, not because I'm obligated to, but because I choose to invest in her potential. In a way, this difficult experience has clarified what true family support means. It isn't enabling destructive patterns or sacrificing your own well-being. It's offering help that actually helps even when that's harder and less immediately gratifying than a quick fix. The boundaries I've established aren't walls to keep people out. They're the foundation that allows me to offer genuine support from a position of strength rather than resentment. By refusing to be the family scapegoat or easy solution, I've actually created space for everyone to grow, including myself. Standing firm wasn't selfish. It was an act of love. Love for myself, certainly, but ultimately, love for my family too, even if they couldn't see it at the time. Real love sometimes means saying no when yes would be easier, but ultimately harmful. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who felt entitled to your resources? How did you handle the inevitable guilt and pressure? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more perspectives on navigating complex family dynamics. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect what they've worked hard to build. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stand your ground.